Buying real estate is an incredibly thrilling milestone, isn't it? But let's be totally honest for a second. The absolute mountain of legal paperwork that comes with it, yeah, that can be absolutely terrifying. It's so easy to just feel completely lost in all that dense legal jargon. So, in this explainer, we're going to turn that anxiety into confidence. We're going to break down the single most critical document of the entire process, figuring out exactly how it acts as your ultimate shield against property nightmares, making absolutely sure your dream home actually truly becomes yours. Okay, let's dive into this. Think of this as your step-by-step real estate survival map. First, we'll look at the property buying timeline. Then we'll define the sale deed itself. After that, we'll go through the essential sale deed clauses, outline some crucial buyer precautions, and finally wrap up with the actual execution process.
Starting us off with Section 1, the property buying timeline.
So, walking through this timeline, your journey naturally kicks off with negotiations. You and the seller haggle a bit, right? And once you agree on a price, you take the very first financial step, which is paying in advance. Now, typically, this is about 10% of the total property value. Once you've paid that, both of you sign a preliminary document called the agreement to sell. Now, keep in mind, this is not the final deal, but it does start a countdown clock. You usually get a 2 to 3 month window before the final payment is due, and that buffer is crucial. It basically gives you the breathing room you need to lock down your bank loans or maybe liquidate some other assets, all without the crazy pressure of an immediate closing date.
Moving on to Section 2, defining the sale deed. Because after that payment window closes, you hit the most critical step.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference because it is incredibly easy to confuse the preliminary paperwork with the final deal. That agreement to sell we literally just talked about, well, it just outlines the rules of the transaction. It dictates your payment schedule or, what kind of damages apply if someone suddenly backs out. But the sale deed, that is the grand finale. It's the powerful document that officially executes the final, irrevocable transfer of absolute ownership rights right out of the seller's hands and into yours. And just think about the sheer power you unlock once that specific conveyance deed is executed. You're getting complete, absolute ownership here. You get the right to use the property literally however you see fit. You get the right to lease it or rent it out for some passive income. You have the right to mortgage it against a loan. And of course, you have the right to eventually sell it yourself. This is totally different from, say, a simple lease deed, which really only gives you the temporary right to just live somewhere. No, the sale deed makes you the absolute master of the property. That means nobody, not even the previous owner, has any say in what color you paint the living room or who you rent it out to.
Which brings us to Section 3, essential sale deed clauses. Let's do a surgical breakdown of what's inside this thing.
So picture this. You're sitting in your lawyer's office reviewing the draft. You need to treat this like a tangible mental checklist. You have to ensure every single one of these elements is flawlessly recorded. You need the exact details of all the parties involved. We're talking full names, ages, precise addresses. You need the property schedule, which just means the exact area, the orientation, and the hyper-specific location of the plot or flat. It also has to contain a meticulous history of all your payment details, whether you paid by check or online transaction. And absolutely crucially, it needs to outline a concrete timeline for exactly when the seller is going to hand over physical possession of the property to you. But here, right here, is where you need to be incredibly vigilant. Pay really close attention to this specific term, encumbrance. An encumbrance is, well, basically hidden financial baggage that's tied directly to the property itself. We are talking about an uncleared home loan, maybe years of unpaid property taxes, or pending society maintenance dues that the seller just left behind. Your sale deed must explicitly declare that the property is completely free of all encumbrances, because if you miss this, there's a very real chance you end up legally adopting the seller's hidden debts, and nobody wants that. So, the crucial point is that you need a bulletproof safety net, and that is exactly what an indemnity clause provides. Think of it as a legally binding guarantee written straight into the deed, where the seller flat out agrees to financially compensate you for any future damages or claims that pop up because of their past actions. Like, what happens if a totally hidden legal issue surfaces 5 years down the road because of something the seller did? Well, this clause right here is your ultimate financial shield.
All right, let's look at Section 4, crucial buyer precautions.
Now, you might be a little surprised to learn that you actually need to trace the property's title history back 20 to 30 years. I know, decades. It might sound totally excessive, but it is absolutely crucial. Why? Because you have to ensure that no random third parties or, long-lost legal heirs who didn't get compensated can just unexpectedly pop out of the woodwork and claim a legal right to your new property. Tracing a clean, continuous chain of title for decades is basically what prevents you from getting trapped in endless, massively expensive litigation. And when you're reviewing that legal draft, please remember this golden rule. No conditions. None. You are paying for absolute title transfer. If you're reading the deed and you spot ambiguous phrases like "this sale is subjected to XYZ condition," you need to push back on that immediately. Conditional clauses effectively strip away your absolute ownership rights, and they leave you stranded in this incredibly vulnerable gray legal area. The transfer simply must be absolute and unconditional.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 5, the execution process.
It all comes down to this clean, chronological 4-step execution process to get you to the finish line. First, both parties agree on that prepared legal draft. Next up, you pay the required state stamp duty. Then, the buyer, the seller, and your witnesses all provide their signatures and thumbprints. And finally, you make it completely official by registering the deed at the sub-registrar's office.
Actually, I want to pause on step 2 for just a second, because you really need to budget for this hidden cost. Stamp duty generally ranges anywhere from 4 to 10% of the property's total value. Honestly, it can feel a bit like buying a whole extra room in the house that you don't even get to use. And it's important to know that this massive expense is legally borne entirely by you, the buyer. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the final technicalities required at the sub-registrar's office. You can't just sign it and forget about it. The deed legally must be registered within 4 months of signing. The seller actually has to physically present the original property documents there to prove their validity. You're going to need 2 witnesses, ideally one representing you and one representing the seller. Oh, and here's a pretty great legal workaround. If you, the buyer, have a personal emergency and just cannot physically be there, you are actually allowed to grant a power of attorney to someone else so they can present the documents for you. We have journeyed all the way from that initial 10% advance to officially navigating the sub-registrar's office. So, with your real estate survival map firmly in hand, the real question is, are you ready to confidently navigate the market and claim your absolute ownership? Armed with an understanding of all those clauses, the danger of encumbrances, and the exact execution steps, you literally no longer need to fear the paperwork. You are protected. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy